everyone, and welcome to the program. This is Sunday Politics, live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbaloye in Lagos. Perhaps some of your top stories coming out of Nigeria today are those related to insecurity, where many people have been reportedly killed, with houses and vehicles burned during an attack by gunmen on a Gangan community in a Barakpa area of Oyo State. Although the police have now said that about 11 people have been confirmed dead, including some of the assailants. And in Imo State, security operatives says they've repelled an attack by gunmen on the State Police Command headquarters close to the government house in Owerri in early hours of today. The police said 5 of those hoodlums were killed and others injured during a gun duel with security operatives. And at least 20 persons have been reported killed in a motor accident along the Kaduna-Kano Road. But tonight, we're still on a matter that has generated huge debate and reactions in Nigeria across the globe. And it is the decision of the federal government to suspend the operations and use of Twitter, a macro-blogging site in Nigeria. And this is how things began. Take a look at the tweet that caused the whole matter. The post read, and I quote, "Many of those behaving today are too young to be aware of the destruction and loss of lives that occurred during the Nigerian Civil War. Those of us in the fields for 30 months who went through the war we treat them in the language they understand," end of quote. That was a statement attributed to President Muhammadu Buhari. The tweet was deleted on Wednesday as the platform said, Twitter said it had violated its policy on abusive behavior. And on Friday, the federal government announced that it has suspended the operations of the micro-blogging site. That generated controversies, and the Attorney General of the Federation warned against using Twitter, instructing the Office of the Public Prosecution to prosecute those found wanting. Tonight, we have a multi-layer of conversation on this matter, and we will begin by speaking with the Director General of the National Orientation Agency, a government agency involved in communication and shaping public opinion, the impact of what the government has done in the last few days. Mr. Garba Abari joins us from our Abuja studio tonight. Thank you so much, Mr. Abari, for joining us tonight. And let's begin the conversation. You've seen the kind of outrage online and offline caused by the action of government to suspend Twitter. Even those who do not use Twitter are talking about it. That action has been tagged undemocratic. How do you defend that, DG?
Thank you very much, and a very good evening. Let us not get this fact lost on us. First, we must understand that we are in a constitutional democracy. And in a constitutional democracy, there are spelled out rules, regulations, processes, and procedures of doing things. What government had done is definitely in the larger interest of the Nigerian society. Basically because if you take the so-called offensive tweet or the tweet that Twitter said violates their code and put it in context, what is abusive about that tweet? Is it a fact or is it a lie that Nigeria fought a civil war? Is it a fact or is it a lie that in that civil war, millions of lives were lost, properties beyond which you cannot even quantify in material terms, in terms of loss of lives, loss of property, loss of man-hour, loss of infrastructure, loss of, all of this. Is it a lie that Nigeria did not pass through all this? But is it a lie also that when you are on the Twitter, because I am always on Twitter, and I see the kind of hate that is being played out on the social media, and especially on Twitter, by young men and women who actually correctly, as the president has said, do not know the history of the country, where the country is coming from, and therefore where we are headed, and are trying, either deliberately or out of ignorance, or as conduits of certain forces, to tweet things that largely have far-reaching security implications for this country. I think contextually, Twitter, if it had done its homework, would have seen that there was actually nothing harmful from what this president has said. Because whatever it is that had been said, put it into context, it is nothing but a certain, absolutely certain, and the graphic summary of the Nigerian experience during the Civil War, which no Nigerian would want to have a repeat of. So in this respect, therefore, I feel government is right, government is in order. First and foremost, the country has to exist. We must have to have a country first before we would have a Twitter. We must have to have a country that is peaceful and secure before we have a before we have people with tweet handles. We have to have a country that is about that is by and large now, concerned about the restoration of peace and order in the society, given all the challenges that we are passing through. This is a major distraction which the nation cannot afford, and therefore the government had taken the right, correct decision within the context of what is obtained in a constitutional democracy.
Because, like you mentioned, we are in a constitutional democracy, and one of the pillars of that is the ability to have conversation around what we disagree with, and sometimes what we agree with, sometimes we disagree to agree or agree to disagree. Let me ask you, do you understand how deleting a tweet works, or how the Twitter microblogging site works in terms of the algorithm that is being used in this sense? Do you understand, Mr. Abari?
Why do you have to ask me that?
I'm asking because
the point is simple.
So that we can. So because the next question I'm going to ask you.
The issue is simple. The issue is simple. Whether I know what are the processes involved in deleting a tweet or I do not, the fact still remains that a tweet has been made, like I have always done. And what usually they say should be done should be something like, if you find a problem with you or someone disagreeing or being abusive on a tweet, on your Twitter handle, you complain to Twitter, and they take the necessary action. But in the case of what has happened, nobody complain about anything, because it is just a regular thing that is being said. In fact, worse things have been said on Twitter without Twitter pulling down these kind of messages. So what's the problem?
Well, I'm not sure Twitter has said that nobody complained, because what we understand that works with Twitter is that there is usually a protest that leads to this kind of, the complaint, a protest against some messages, and then the microblogging site will pull down as the case may be, just like we saw, we've seen severally. But let me quickly ask you, you heard
But what I'm still saying is, does that statement in any way contradict the realities of the Nigerian situation? Does it harm anybody? Does it abuse anybody? Did it bully anybody? There was no any case of bully. There was no any abusive language that was deployed in that tweet. In fact, whatever that was said in that tweet was an actual factual certain capture of the reality of the Nigerian situation. Look, young men and women who do not know where we are coming from, please do not do things that will take us back to the days of old, when we had to be gnashing our teeth and be actually and be reduced biting our fingers, because this is what we went through, and we are, as much as possible, trying to avoid a repeat of this very unpleasant, very objectionable reality. So what is the harm in that?
Mr. Abari, let me quickly put this in, because you said you also follow the conversation on Twitter, and these are some of the reactions that I also monitored and followed. Part of the conversation was the offense some people took, some people from the Southeast extraction who felt like the statement of the president came at a point where they are remembering those who died in the Civil War. Do you think that message perhaps fell at the wrong side of those who are from that part of the country?
I don't want to talk about what is happening in the Southeast. I don't want to talk about it. It's a very unfortunate situation that is happening. I don't want to talk about it because I am still studying what the situation is there. I'm looking at motives. I'm looking at directions. I'm looking at outcomes. I'm looking at so many things before I can conclusively make comments on what is happening in the Southeast.
Because I'm leaving that premise because that is perhaps what angered some people, according to them, which led to the protest. But let me ask you, based on your work, you head an organization that manages disseminate information, coordinate, and help shape public opinion. How do you do that in this digital age?
Of course, we do it in so many ways. Twitter is one of them. Twitter is one of the hundreds that we...
So what is the impact?
Twitter is...
So it leads me to the next question. So what impact is the suspension of Twitter going to have on you discharging your responsibility to the public in this digital age?
It is a collateral damage that we must have to bear with, but it cannot be taken as more important than our national well-being and national security.
Well, again, there have been reactions.
It doesn't stop us from carrying out our functions. So it is only one wing. It is only one aspect of our social media. It's only one aspect of our social media engagement platforms. And if it is a collateral damage, I think we can bear that collateral damage with bearing in mind that there are larger national security interests that will be better protected without Twitter.
So there have been reactions from several parts of the world over the federal government's decision to suspend Twitter in Nigeria. Don't you think that this step might further reinforce the criticism of this government in some quarters that it is intolerant to voices of dissent and perhaps those accusations that this government is dictatorial in its tendencies and in its actions?
Say it in what aspect are you putting that? Protest nationally or protest from the international community? If it is protest nationally, it is expected because we are in a constitutional democracy and therefore we expect opposition. When the PDP comes out to condemn the action, you know, it is expected. We didn't expect less. It should come definitely from them because this is what they feel is all they are out to do, in order to remain relevant on the political space. So if that is the context in which you are putting the protest, I will take it as a normal practice in a constitutional democracy for people to have their say. And this, even if their say undermines national interest, great national interest and the national security. But I want you to remember that whatever it is, we need to have a country first. We are all concerned about what is happening in the country today. Everybody is concerned. And what government is trying to do is actually, in addition to deploying security operations all over the country, it is also engaging in some other complementary activities and the measures to ensure that greater consultation and the dialogue is taking place so that people see that there is the need for this country to remain one united country without peaceful country. Without peace and security, there will be no Nigeria. And those who feel
Yeah,
that
Mr.
when the
Abari,
katakata begins,
yes,
listen. So those who feel that when the katakata begins, they can observe this thing from the comfort of their living rooms, they are definitely, I want to tell you, they are mistaken. Because even to get to the airport, for them to fly out and meet their godfathers outside the country will be an impossibility to them.
So, because the question I'm asking, for those who think, and I've criticized this government, that's the part where I wanted you to talk about. Those who criticize this government as against voices of dissent, and those who think that freedom of speech is endangered under this government. Don't you think, because you manage PR for this government, you manage public opinion to the Nigerian people, and you know what people were saying, and some of those who have criticized that this government, in their tendencies, there are dictatorial tendencies. Those are the kind of criticism. Doesn't this action also reinforce those kind of narrative?
I am not, and I repeat, I am not expecting a 100% endorsement of this government. Because to do that is actually to expect an impossibility. But let me throw this question back to you. You are a journalist. You operate within the environment, within the context of the Nigerian environment. You operate in the political space. You know how the social space in Nigeria also operates and is run. Tell me in all honesty if there is any encumbrance. If there is any encumbrance that has been put on your way in the discharge of your duty, you as one journalist, or indeed in the discharge of your duty or the operations of channels as a television station, or indeed any other television station, newspaper house, or even a blogging site. Just tell me.
Mr. Abari, unfortunately, I'm not permitted by the ethics of my profession to answer questions. I'm empowered to ask the question. So, as my guest, you are the one constitutionally given the right to answer the question.
I am telling you that I am not expecting a 100% endorsement of this government. I am not. To do that is an impossibility. But I am telling you that this government, as far as things go, respects freedom of speech, respects constitutional rights of every citizen to express him or herself, and of course within the ambits of the law. The freedom for free speech does not give you the right to undermine larger national interests. And there are laws and orders to do that. That is why I told you that this is a constitutional democracy with laws, with processes, with procedures of doing things.
So what offense would anyone caught? Because the Office of the Attorney General has released a statement, a stern one, on the use of Twitter in Nigeria. What offense would anybody caught would said to have committed, and under what law would they be prosecuted?
I am not a lawyer. I do not know under what law they will be prosecuted, but definitely coming from the Office of the Attorney General, I want to think, therefore, that there does exist a situation, or there does exist a law that gives the office or the Attorney General's office the power to do that. Otherwise, they wouldn't just sit down and they wake up from their sleep and issue out such an order. I am not a lawyer, but definitely, if there are laws, then such laws must be there before the Attorney General makes that statement.
Someone said this, and perhaps let me put it as a question. Don't you think it will be going too far, prosecuting people because of usage of social media? There's no social media law bill yet passed. Would it be right for the government of the day to prosecute anyone for the use of social media? It will not be right for the government to prosecute anybody for the use of social media, but it is within the context, within the constitutional duties and rights of government to prosecute anybody whose use of social media contravenes the set rules as encapsulated in the laws. Of course, you don't forget there is the national cyber laws. There are also other laws in which some forms of
actions on the social media had been or are being considered as criminal, and therefore under such laws people can be prosecuted. So don't say that government is going to prosecute people for using the social media so generic, so in such a generic sense. But the government definitely, in exercise of its constitutional powers, can penalize anybody whose activity on the social media, not necessarily Twitter, constitute larger national threat to our national interest, national objectives, and the national aspirations.
I was actually referring to the issue of the use of Twitter now, but let me quickly get these out. The diplomatic missions of Canada, the European Union, Ireland, the United Kingdom, as well as the United States, have also weighed in on this matter. Take a listen to what they said. They said that they are disappointed in the action of the government. They're claiming it's against the people's fundamental human rights of free expression and access to information, which is a pillar of democracy. Is this not a dent on the nation's image on the global stage?
No, it is not. Because whatever it is, we have ourselves first to preserve. There is a Nigeria first to preserve. There are Nigerian citizens' rights and responsibilities and duties and the security first to preserve before kowtowing to any international do-gooders.
So let me put some perspectives into the conversation. I'd like you to take a look at this. Perhaps some of the implications that this brings, economically speaking, or perhaps let me give you some quick facts about Twitter in Nigeria as it operates. Stands suspended. There are about 40 million Twitter users in Nigeria. Twitter usage accounts for about 25.52% of internet users in Nigeria. So invariably, what it then means is that it's about 1/4 of the 100 million internet users in Nigeria. So this is the enormity of the deprivation of these social media platform. But let's take a look at the cost impact of Twitter disruption on the Nigerian economy. And take a look at this. This is how much might be lost to the disruption of Twitter on the Nigerian economy. It will cost about 65 billion a month and about 2 million naira a day. That is according to netblocks.org. They have calculated, there is a barometer to calculate the loss and what this disruption could be. And so my question is, at the moment where the economy is recovering from a shock, unemployment rate is at 33%, exchange rate is about 400 naira to a dollar, and inflation rate is at 18%. Does this somewhat re-echoes what some Nigerians tag as an irrational decision of government?
It is not an irrational. Well, I am happy you said some Nigerians. Yes, but like I have told you, even if it is a collateral damage, the country would rather have this than to allow Twitter to worsen our security situation and cause mayhem that will lead to larger national tragedy. This is one. Two, are these losses that you have all computed now a one-way traffic, or does in any way Twitter also stand to lose anything from 40 million users in the country? Does Twitter stand to lose anything? Even if it does, what I am saying is the peace of this country, the security of this country, the well-being of this country, our national cohesion, the national unity that we have all been talking about and emphasizing at a time like this, are things that cannot be quantified in material terms. We are talking about billions. We are talking about billions.
So let me ask you, Mr. Abari,
How do
the
you
government.
how do you compare all these large national objectives, to a pittance like the billions you are talking about? No, please.
Are you aware that people run, some of people, Nigerians who run their business on some of these social media platforms, and that the disruption might have cost them some money every day?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Of course, yes.
And
But what I'm still saying is that we still have to have a country before you can do any kind of business, whether it is an online business or it is offline business. You just have to have a country first.
So on a final note, Mr. Abari, this government has been accused of using this same social media platform to win elections or to campaign, part of their strategy, and now is clamping down on the same platform it used when it was reading out its campaign agenda. How do you describe this, or how do you what do you tell to Nigerians, say to Nigerians who think that you've used it and now you think is now not working for you? Just in 30 seconds, if you may respond to that.
I take exception to your use of the word clamp down. I take exception to that. Nobody is clamping down on anybody. That is one. If the government had used the social media to win election, we are not far away from another set of elections in less than 2 years from now. The same social media can be used to sell the government out if Nigerians so wish. So this is just about it, and it's my response to it. And this is the beauty of constitutional democracy. The choice lies with the people, and not with Twitter. And if Twitter is just a conduit that can win the election for any political party, of course, there is no harm in that for anybody to use it. But I admit the fact that this government had used the social media to send out political messages which turned out to be to the advantage of the APC that is now ruling. And the same social media platforms will still be there when we go into the elections in 2023. So let's go, and by the time we get to the bridge, we cross it.
Mr. Garba Abari, the Director General of the National Orientation Agency, thank you so much for your time tonight on the program.
My pleasure.
Well, we'll take a breather, and when we come back after the break, we'll talk more about the impact of the suspension of Twitter in Nigeria by the federal government. Of course, we'll now be looking at the legal implications. I'll be joined by two lawyers from two different political divides. Join us after this break, everyone. Welcome back, everyone. Let's get back to the conversation. I'm now being joined by two lawyers who perhaps do not agree on the decision of the federal government over the suspension of Twitter in Nigeria and what this means for the civic space in the country. Mr. Daniel Buwala is a lawyer and a member of the Lincoln's Inn. He joins us from London, is an APC member. And Mr. Anthony Heilebo is also a lawyer and a member of the PDP. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. Let me begin the conversation with Mr. Buwala. What can you tell us, or what justifies the decision of the government in suspending Twitter in Nigeria?
Well, thank you for having me, and good evening to your viewers. Let's give a context to this issue. Twitter deleted the tweet of the president of Nigeria, and Twitter's attention was drawn to multiple tweets on Twitter that are capable of destroying the country because they were tweets that were inciting violence. And Twitter responded by saying that they reviewed it and they did not find that those tweets violated their rule. So clearly, by that indication, Twitter expressed and demonstrated bias. Hence, the government of Nigeria decided that Twitter must respond to the takedown request or Twitter will be suspended. Twitter never honored the request of Nigeria and they got suspended. The steps taken by Nigeria, is it right? Yes. Is it lawful? Yes. And these are the proofs. In 2011, after the wake of riot in London here that broke out and people were destroying shops, stealing and looting, and it grew from Peckham to Lewisham to Hackney to Walthamstow, and before you know it, it now had a copycat effect in Manchester, in Birmingham. At that time, David Cameron, the prime minister then, told Twitter that if they do not respond to the request by the United Kingdom to take out and delete certain accounts and posts, that he was going to shut down Twitter. Twitter obeyed, and that is why they were eventually not shut down. In France, after the anti-Semitist comment and racial tweets by unidentified individuals on Twitter, the government of France asked that Twitter should take down the account and the post. And the government and Twitter responded in some and refused to respond in others. The Association of Jewish Students went to court and got an order from the court in France mandating Twitter to release the PII, that is personal identifiable information about those who hide under a pseudonym. Guess what the Twitter gave as their defense? That Twitter did not have an office in France and they didn't have employees. Therefore, the issue of jurisdiction will not have effect on them. That tells you why they refuse to establish office in Nigeria, to avoid strict liability. In India, Twitter tolerated a tweet by a separatist leader that was creating confusion and trouble in India. And the government of India asked Twitter specifically to take down certain posts and accounts, failure upon which they were going to ban Twitter. Twitter obeyed some and left some, and they decided to suspend Twitter. There is no, in America, after the 2016 election that brought Donald Trump, the Democrat-led Congress, when they saw that data analytics by Oxford released how social media owners were manipulating algorithms and shaping public perception, influencing election, they conducted investigation hearing where they emphatically warned Facebook and Twitter, Google and other owners of the tech to stop the manipulation and turn down certain tweets that are offensive. Otherwise, they were going to be banned. Twitter obeyed. In the case of Nigeria, when the request was made to Twitter, Twitter, in fact, made a derogatory statement that I read. These were their response to the request. They say, at Muhammadu Buhari, we don't know who you are or the country you lead. We come across a tweet that offends our rules and we decided to take it down. And I said to myself, if you do not know as a company, a country that has more than 30 million subscribers and the president of that country, either you're the dumbest person on earth or you're an agent of foreign forces trying to destabilize Nigeria. You see, shown in the case of Twitter, Jack Dorsey demonstrated that he is a person of interest. He participated in the NSAS protest sometime in October last year by retweeting a tweet that was made of means to generate funds to run protests. He is not a Nigerian, does not have business interests in Nigeria, has no basis to take part in any protest in Nigeria. But the same Jack Dorsey, in the case of America, he classified the protesters of January 6th as insurrectionists. So this double standard that is being brought to the developing countries needs to be checked with facts. So even the statement by the European Union, by America, Canada, and the rest must be seen within the light of facts and against evidence. We agree that social media platform can advance democracy. We agree it can boost our trade. We agree it will shape public engagement. But where we have a point of departure is that the same request they made to Twitter when it was threatening their country, Nigeria made similar requests. And until Twitter abides by that, Nigeria will keep Twitter under suspension. Right. It is convenient for them to talk about free speech now because their countries are not in problem. But when their countries were in problem, they demanded that and Twitter obeyed.
Let me allow Mr. Ehilebo to respond to. He's a member of the PDP, and I know his party and some Nigerians are not happy. How do you respond to Mr. Buala, Mr. Ehilebo?
Okay, so first of all, I'll remind Mr. Buala that this is one of those people that deprived Governor Obaseki from contesting, and we see the outcome of the Supreme Court judgment as to his decision when he took that decision. So we must be careful the kind of facts he spews out, because for me, somebody that can come on air and say the United Kingdom sought to suspend Twitter, where I have lived, where I went to school, where I was called, where I actually got my law degree at the University of Buckingham, such an action will never take place in the United Kingdom. So we cannot use that as an excuse for a regime that we know the head of this regime, as far back as 1983, he promulgated the Decree 4 to try and restrict the free speech of Nigerians. And since this regime came into power, it has sought at every point to restrict the freedom of speech of Nigerians. They started with the No to Social Media Bill acronym that we started, and we protested. Luckily, at the time, we had a Senate president in the person of Bukola Saraki that listened to the cries of the people and felt that this stifling free speech was something that he would never be a party to. And that was how we quelled that. Now, for him to say that the Nigerian government made a request, that was not what happened. It wasn't Jack Dorsey or Twitter itself that decided to take down the tweet of Mr. It was people that reported the vile and malicious tweet from the handle of the president. And if you notice, it was only the specific tweet that referred to the civil war. And if Mr. Bwala has taken his time to read the Twitter community rules, and also said that to the DG of the NOA, if he has taken his time to read the Twitter rules, it is specific that Twitter will not tolerate when people refer to Holocaust, or it was very, very specific in its rules that we will not tolerate anybody making reference to any occasion where people were mass murdered. People were killed in their numbers. And this is just coming a day after the memorial of those that lost their lives in the Civil War. Such a touchy subject. Nigerians were incensed that how can their own government in the handle of the president, tweet such a thing. Now, for someone to go and say, or come to the public space and say to me, or to any other person listening, that it is within the right of the government to stifle the speech of Nigerians, and also refer to governments that have spoken up against five known embassies have come together. It has never happened in Nigeria in the recent time that 5 of them will come together and issue a statement, a joint statement, that Nigeria should be aware that we are also signatories to international treaties that allow for the freedom of people both offline and online. Now, when you say the Nigerian government made a request for Twitter to take down a post, no, I don't think that if Twitter reviews anybody's post, any of us will support that anybody is making an insightful comment that would lead to breakdown of anarchy, chaos in the country, we would support whatever it was. And that was why Nigerians en masse reported the tweet. It wasn't I think we should be clear. It wasn't the action of Twitter independently. It was the report that it got from a lot of Nigerian handles, a lot of international handles, that this tweet violates your own community rules. Please take it down. And as such, I think that and I always go back to the DG of NOA because he spoke before me. That is the person responsible for making Nigerians aware or educating Nigerians on what they need to do. If the Nigerian government indeed felt that some characters were making posts on Twitter that violated some of its in-country rules, perhaps what they should have done was to solicit the help of Nigerians to report those particular accounts. But I didn't see anywhere where the Minister of Information, in the person of Mr. Lai Mohammed, made any solicitation to Nigerians that we should report massively an account that is fomenting trouble for the country. Instead, what they did was to, without even thinking of the economy, you have outlined the economic importance of Twitter to Nigerians. A lot of Nigerians have been thrown off their jobs. A lot of Nigerians do not have anything to do other than social media because the real sector has been totally destroyed by insecurity. I had to close a farm that was producing 200 crates of egg 2 weeks ago because of insecurity. I could not afford to go and start paying ransom for my workers or anybody on that farm. And so therefore, if I was somebody that was heavily invested in social media communication, that means my second source of livelihood has been destroyed by the Nigerian government. What are they telling me to do? That the next thing available is to look for the next alternative source of which may not even be legal. So we should be very considerate when we make or do certain things or policies that will affect the common man on the street. Because this action by the Nigerian government has shown that it has no care. It does not take the Nigerian people into consideration before making any of its policies. By the way, and if I may ask, under what law does this government purport to suspend or ask Nigerians not to tweet? Under what law? Section 36(8) of the Constitution does not provide. I know you asked that question to the DG of NOA. Then he asked him that under what law is it that the Attorney General would say that anybody that tweets will, and none of them have been able to answer it. When you ask them, they'll tell you they will see you in court. They will bring journalists threatening Nigerians. Since when have Nigerians lost the ability for them to challenge the government, for them to hold government accountable. While the DGNOA was speaking, do you know I went to the website of NOA to try and find out what the budget of NOA? Lo and behold, there was nothing on the website. There was nothing that spoke to the issues. These are people who should use this medium to educate Nigerians. Over the last couple of weeks, over the last couple of weeks, we have made concerted efforts using Twitter's new tool called Spaces to engage Nigerians and say, let us douse the tension around the country. A lot of people are tense. A lot of people have been out of work. A lot of people have lost their jobs. COVID brought its own problems. With Twitter, we were able to, 3 weeks ago, a young lady by the name of Ini Umoren applied for a job and went for the job and went missing. Her friend raised their alarm that she was missing. And with the help of people, not the Nigerian police, we were able to find out this particular individual that had asked her to come for that.
Anthony, let me allow Daniel to come in.
Today.
Yeah. Just a moment. Let me allow, because we need to give an equal balance of timing for this conversation. Let me allow because I see that he wanted to respond before I throw in another question for us to look at, because the legal implication is the reason for this segment of the program. So, Mr. Boala, let me allow you about a minute to respond to Mr. Ehilebo.
Okay, let me respond by saying these facts, that I think, just like you rightly guided, that we are here to discuss law, not personal issues. The fact that he has lived in England, has studied in England, is immaterial. He is not entitled to his facts. I have also studied my postgraduate degree here in England. I did transfer to the bar. I'm even speaking from England. But what matters is research, industry. What is the position of the law? And this is a fact I'm saying that can be verified. In 2011, David Cameron threatened to shut down Twitter. Twitter had to comply. Israel threatened to shut down Twitter. Twitter had to comply. Turkey, France, Germany. In fact, in one of these African countries, they even shut down Twitter, conducted election before they came back to the social media. Now, here is the position of the law. Twitter is not a registered company in Nigeria. Twitter is not a Nigerian company. Twitter is not a foreign company registered in Nigeria. Therefore, Twitter in Nigeria does not have a legal personality. Twitter cannot assert right and seek for redress within the territory of Nigeria. A Nigerian citizen cannot secure a remedy against the government of Nigeria because he cannot access Twitter. His contract is with Twitter. Whatever he loses, he can get it under the agreement he has had with Twitter. Now, what is very clear is that the Nigerian government cannot prosecute a Nigerian for using Twitter, because the law of the land says that nobody can be tried or convicted for an offense that is not defined by law, for which the punishment is prescribed in a written legislation. That area, there is no further discussion on that. But as to the right of Nigeria to suspend Twitter pending compliance, it is lawful, it is legal, it is moral, and I have cited example of the holier-than-thou nation to you. When they were in their crisis moment, they called Twitter to order. But now it is convenient for them because they do not have a crisis. We in Nigeria are faced up with existential crisis. And therefore, the government cannot sit and watch Twitter, especially not social media platform. I'm talking about Twitter in particular, whose founder has indicated a clear case of interest in Nigeria. I'm even advising the federal government to proceed further and lodge a complaint in the United States Congress, to call Twitter to explain the particular interest he has in Nigeria, whether to destabilize Nigeria or whether he's acting as an agent.
Mr. Boala, let me quickly bring in Mr. Ehilebo. But I'd like to ask you this question, Mr. Ehilebo, because if you look at what happened in the United States, when the former president, Donald Trump, is someone who is very engaged so much on Twitter, and we saw a situation where there were warnings to him on his engagement and some of the messages he sent out. Did Twitter warn the president, if there is any, considering that he's the president? And apart from that, why it does look like after there was a protest from the government, from what I understand, there was the Twitter deleted tweets from Nnamdi Kanu. What do you have to say to this?
Now, Sheung, it's interesting that my brother there would make allusions to things that never happened. And he's saying that Jack Dorsey endorsed. Has he forgotten that the wife of the president of the United States carried a placard and said, "Bring back our girls"? What are we going to do to her? Are we going to go and tell her that she doesn't have a right to express herself? These are the kind of people that we have around government who advise government and tell government that they can recriminate people and tell people that they should not express themselves. Please, Shehu, let me say this for all intents and purposes. The most powerful man in the world, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, had his tweets deleted while he was campaigning for an election. What happened? Did he shut down Twitter? He didn't shut down Twitter. He has even been permanently banned from Twitter. A former ex-president of the United States has been banned from Twitter because he violated the rules of Twitter. Let us stop. And he said that Twitter does not have legal personality. Does the internet belong to Nigeria? Don't we use the internet in Nigeria? And the most amazing thing is that the Nigerian government has succeeded in excluding itself from the conversation. It is no longer in the conversation, but Nigerians are still talking on Twitter. What have they succeeded in doing? They have made a mess and a fool of themselves. We must use some perspective and treat issues as they ought to be treated. We cannot continue as a country that is seen to be repressive, a country that would want to become a regime of oppression, a country that will want to stifle free speech. This Twitter space self-regulates itself. If the presidency or anybody for that nature felt that someone like Nnamdi, and you also alluded that they deleted his tweets, has Nnamdi Kanu shut down Twitter? He's saying they should lodge a complaint because does he think that America is a country that does not respect fundamental rights? This same Twitter, Facebook has banned Donald Trump. Donald Trump appealed against it recently. They have still not brought him back. He had over 67 million followers. And they took him down, even though it was at a great cost to them. They took the tweet down because he violated the rules of their community. The rules of the community of Twitter are very clear.
Mr. Hilabo, I would like to go to Mr. Abuala because of our time, but I'd like you to quickly just touch on this. If my producer can put up those countries that have equally suspended Twitter, and perhaps if any country deems fit that what they are saying in their domain is not what they like. Some of the countries include China, Iran, North Korea, Turkmenistan, and Nigeria has joined that list.
Look at the 5 countries that
even tell you in the case of North Korea, before North Korea,
Iran. Is that the kind of people?
Mr. Boala, just a moment. A moment. I wanted him to react so that you take those two reactions together. Mr. Hilaba, please go ahead.
See, Nigeria is the only country currently in Africa that has banned Twitter. Look at the pairs. You have just listed 5 countries. Look at it. We want to be in the same place with Iran. We want to be in the same place with China in terms of fundamental human rights. Does it even make sense to anybody that you want to stifle free speech at this point in time? Okay, let us even assume, without conceding, that we have a security situation in Nigeria. This government has not learned the art of dialogue. It has not learned that you need to engage your people. You need to use the same medium that your enemy is using, or whoever is an enemy of state is using to engage people. You need to use it to dispel such rumors. I have been online for the past 2-3 weeks dispelling a lot of propaganda that people who would seek to destabilize Nigeria are doing. It is a hard task, and I expect people like DG of NOA, people like Daniel Buala, to assist in doing these things.
So let me
and stifle speech. The more you stifle speech, the more you get what you are getting today.
Let me allow Mr. Buala to come back into the conversation.
Every Nigerian.
Mr. Buala, your response to some of the things he said now.
First of all, it's false that Nigeria is the only country in Africa that has banned Twitter. I think it is either Namibia or Zambia, one of these countries. I'll pick the name later. They suspended all social media when they were conducting election. And shortly after, in 2020, and shortly after their election, they restored all other platforms and kept Twitter aside till this very moment as we're talking. That's one. Number 2, I'm struggling to find a comparison between Michelle Obama raising the placard of Bring Back Our Girls and the protests in Lagos. There's no comparison. Bring Back Our Girls is a request for all well-meaning Nigerians to work towards ensuring that the girls who were adopted are brought back. The protests in Lagos, the president endorsed the protest for the first 1-2 weeks. The only part where they had a departure with the government was when they tabled the request and the president said, I will grant all of it. And they say, we are not leaving the street until we see the action. So I'm struggling to find the comparison. And then thirdly, sir, with the greatest respect, he has not been able to establish law. He has not been able to establish common sense and logic or counter my facts with fact. He will only dispel the fact. But even after we finish this tonight, You as a journalist can confirm every word that I have said tonight. Countries that are bound. In South Korea, let me even tell you the intriguing one. South Korea, when North Korea was using its Twitter to propagate falsehood about South Korea demanded from Twitter that they took down some of these posts and accounts, otherwise they were going to suspend Twitter. Canada and America lauded the decision of South Korea until Twitter had to obey. The reason why in America, in the case of Donald Trump, why they could not do anything is because the First Amendment in America, all the courts in America, right to the Supreme Court, said that the First Amendment concerns the government. It is a protective right against government, not against private owners of social media. But that if somebody's right is infringed, you can bring that to court. But even in America, it was after Donald Trump lost election that they removed him from Twitter because they knew he couldn't have any power to influence. The Democrats have taken over the Congress. If Donald Trump had won the election, with the Republicans in control of the Congress, they would have played ball, because that was exactly what Mark Zuckerberg did. He complied with every bit of what was said on Twitter. So,
Mr. Bwala,
on human rights.
Mr. Bwala, we need to go now, but we have 60 seconds apiece to respond to this final question. The presidency says the suspension is not personal. The statement released by the presidency reads that the temporary suspension of Twitter is not just a response to the removal of the president's post. There has been a litany of problems with the social media platform in Nigeria where misinformation and fake news spread through it and have had real-world violent consequences. All the while, the company has escaped accountability. Those are the words of the presidency. Considering issues of hate speech, Mr. Hilabo, fake news and some of the harm or damage experienced sometimes on this platform, perhaps the security dimension into this matter, however painful the Twitter suspension may be, would you say the government is proactive, security sense now, in protecting its citizens? Let me allow Mr. Hilabo to go first, just in about 60 seconds each.
Sean, there's no way anybody will tell me this government has been proactive towards providing security. 20 people were killed in Iganga in Barapa. 66 people were killed in Kebbi. The president, on the day he made that tweet, 200 children were kidnapped in Niger State. He did not use his Twitter handle to speak to those issues. I think this is more about regime protection, protecting the regime of this government, rather than providing security for Nigerians. We all appreciate the security dimension of things. And to Mr. Bwala that keeps making flowery excuses for this government, he will do well to come back to Nigeria and let us all enjoy this country and not stay in the UK where he thinks he has some sense of security. He will come back to Nigeria and travel from Abuja to Kaduna in his car and tell me that he has some security, instead of stifling the speech of people who are complaining and telling this government that they have not done well for them.
All right. Mr. Bwala, it's your turn to respond to that same question.
Okay, well, first of all, I live in Nigeria. I only came to the UK to spend a couple of weeks on my own money and my own sweat, not any government. So Hilabo should hold his peace regarding that. And I'll be back in Nigeria and continue the hustle. Then secondly, as regards insecurity, we're all together complaining about insecurity in Nigeria. We want a solution to insecurity. I cannot deny that. But ask him and his taxpayers, the PDP, what is the position? Have you taken your time to ask them what is their own solution that they are providing for the government? Have you been able to ask them what is their comment about the insightful comment on Twitter by some of these other individuals that want to destabilize Nigeria? Or whenever they appear in all television out, they will never say anything that will contribute to stopping insecurity. They will rather be saying the government is the reason why insecurity is there. I will only advise them lastly, let them tell all their bulldogs that this country, we must fight to keep it together. I advise the president not to backslide from firm decision that he has to take to preserve the life and the territorial integrity of Nigeria.
Mr. Daniel Bwala and Mr. Anthony Hilabo, lawyers, both from the different divides, APC and PDP. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time tonight. And that's how we draw the curtain on tonight's program. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I'm Sean Okimale. Bye-bye.